therapy on with Joe Bomb Squad, and I don't know exactly what topic I'm gonna get on right now, but also this live stream is not brought to you by Vanilla Starbucks Double Shot Energy. It has guarana and B vitamins and ginseng. Okay, we're gonna change the mic. Oh, all right, let's see. Let's talk about emotional realization. Sometimes we have thoughts that we can't quite explain, and when we get those thoughts, we try to react against them, and only when we actually study ourselves and realize where those root problems came from, can we understand that in actual life, we realize that where those emotions came from was a thought process. And I talked about this before, but I want to get into it a little bit more than I did before. So emotional realization is like realizing that your thought patterns are messed up for a reason, and when you find out that reason, there's always time for change. And emotional realization is a true, very true fact in life. Realizing, like having an epiphany, or just an everyday epiphany, like, oh my God, that's where that thought came from. That's where I had that fear because of all of those things that were coming up against me, and I'm taking this car.
What the hell was that?
Forgive me, sweetheart.
Realizations can come from anywhere. It can come from not trusting adults when you were little. It can come from not trusting yourself.
We have a civilian in need of assistance
not trusting anything.
Del Perro Freeway.
Most likely comes from emotional realization. It comes from something that you
We've got
experienced
a civilian in need of
trauma.
assistance on Del Perro Freeway.
When you experience trauma and you react emotionally to it because you're not ready for what the experience has for you. Realizing that emotion can break locks on your soul, on whatever you believe in, on your spirit, on your emotional constructs, on in your mind, and it can make new pathways for you to be able to deal with certain trauma or deal with certain things in your life. Realizing that emotional realization is sometimes because of the way we think about things and the way we try to think about things, but the realization that emotions are brought on by thought. So that's the first emotional realization that you ever need to have. Emotions are brought on by thought. You don't think with your heart or think with your gut or think with your anything. People think that your spirit is seppuku and all that different whatever was because no, it was because it's usually because of things that you felt when you were a kid. Realizations that things that they felt from when they were a child. They realized they had butterflies in their stomach, or or they had the
Units
fight or flight
reporting
resistance
a reckless
in
driver
their stomach.
on
And that was
Great
just their
Ocean
stomach
Highway
acid going
in
crazy
Pongva Hills.
because of their emotions and them being on a survival instinct that it's tied to not food but your stomach lining. And,
Whoa! Too close!
and it's like, oh, he's feeling really good right now, or he's feeling really bad right now. It means that he's probably eating food. So your body reacts in certain ways whenever you're doing something. Realizing that those emotional that realization comes from when you start to analyze yourself not with yelling or idiocy or dumbness. You have to be able to relax in pretty much any situation. But that's like an experienced emotional realizer. People can realizing that those emotions can actually lead to realizations, lead to
Dispatch, we have a visual.
I guess I'd say an emotional chi, I guess, or not chi, or an emotional calmness. I guess you can say it's chi, but I mean, once you realize that you can use your emotions for different things, like loving yourself, to love other people, realizing that those emotions are tied to different parts of your body, and also realizing that when you're feeling a certain thing, when you're feeling a certain emotion, I guess loving yourself is the thing that you need to realize that you need to realize
Western Fort Santiago.
Being loving to yourself is one of the main things about emotional realization. Emotional realization can take you onto new pathways and make you feel like you're a better person because of it. And you are a better person because of you realizing your own emotions. Oh my God. Also, trying to see what those emotions have for you, because there are underlying thoughts inside of those emotions, and you can think that those emotions can get you through any situation, but also realize that you're going through the same thought pattern. You're acting, I guess, like an animal, because that's what animals do. They have certain thought patterns that they go through to be able to get to their anger, or to get to what they would like to call, or what we would like to call fierceness for them, and sometimes they can't turn those pathways off. But that's the difference between human and animal. Animals revel in those pathways. They like those pathways. They like those thoughts. But humans themselves can not like those thoughts and calm themselves down out of a stupor, or an idiotic thought pattern, or an idiotic emotion that they think they're having because of some reason. But also coming up with different reasons, and this is the reason why I don't really believe in religion, because religion can cause an emotional what's the word? An emotional construct that we have yet to realize. It's like you realize everything about science, but you're not actually talking or thinking or even saying anything about science. And what science is really just what science is really just or the science of our brains is really just an emotional construct that we feel and see. and and also, disclaimer: I am not a professional. I'm only speaking from personal experience. When we're I just burped. When you're thinking about where you want to go in life or who you want to be, realize that you have to go through a certain amount of emotional, not heartbreak or anything like that, but emotional realization.
Come on, bro.
Realizing that your problems aren't as big as you might think they are, but you're going back to a pathway that tries to take things out of proportion. So like when you get angry or when you get mad at a small situation, realize that those pathways themselves are few and far between. They're small. Your brain is comparatively speaking to the size of an engine is completely small. And so, but also too, it's entirely more complex because emotional realizations can lead to inventions. They can lead to I'd say making yourself feel like making yourself feel like you know someone, I guess. Realizing that person themselves.
What is this bullshit?
And that sucks. Alright. So, emotional realization can make you more familiar with yourself and more familiar with another person or more familiar with the situation. And once you realize that situation is easily handleable, or once you realize that person is on your side, then emotional realization can help you tap into what I'd like to call I'd say emotional an emotional eureka, I guess. And an emotional eureka can be your friend. In the I guess comparatively speaking to the rest of your emotions, realizing that your emotions themselves are controlled by thoughts, so you can change those thoughts and then change your reactions. It's hard to, and also that has to do a lot with and in whatever way you use it, I guess, can be I'd say detrimental to your health, because there's people oh shoot there's people that use emotional realization to control their emotions in every situation, like say like the I'd say the FBI guy, James Comey. He instead of like losing his job and completely like being investigated for stuff, instead of crying over pretty much anything, he literally just kept his cool, and realized that it was just a job. Realized that it wasn't that important, and it wasn't as important as I'd say his family, I guess. I mean, so, and that's not like a personal like thing or anything like that. It's more like realizing that it's not that important to fail, you know. And I'm not saying that, oh my God, he totally failed, but like, oh, he's totally better now. No, that's not. Emotional realization never gets you anywhere except if you have the thought pattern or the thing that you can change inside your own head. So when you go through emotional realization, realize that you're only realizing the emotion, and that you have to pick out the thought pattern that got you to that emotion. So when you try to think about what you're going to do as far as trying to realize different things and help yourself in certain situations, realize that when you realize emotionals, and I'm saying realize so many times because emotional realization is all about realizing a thought pattern. Emotional realization is when you're trying to I'd say break down a thought, or break down where that thought came from, or where that thought came from, whether it came from fear, whether it came from paranoia, because we all have paranoia. I mean, I'm not gonna play around and act like we don't have it, because we as a society, or we as a people, do have paranoia, and it sticks with us. And sometimes it can even help us get out of situations. Because just because you're paranoid doesn't mean that people aren't after you.
So you're gonna drive into me.
It's a thought process that I've learned to be able to not master, but to actually be able to control, I guess, through some medication, but also through because I've been through so many different kinds of medication that it's harder for me to actually think sometimes. I mean, and when you're thinking about what your emotional realization really should be, realize that when you're going through emotions, realize that they come from somewhere. So they come from your own thought pattern. They come from your logical thinking, basically hub, which is your cerebral cortex. Logical thinking can come from pretty much anywhere, and a thought pattern can come from anywhere inside your own brain. So remember, when you're thinking about emotions and you're trying to realize that you shouldn't attach yourself to a certain emotion, because that thought pattern that brought you to that emotion could probably come from somewhere deep inside of you that you forgot about. I'd say when you were younger, or when you were about like 3 to 4 or something like that. So remember, when those thought patterns come to you, when those thought patterns go away, when you're trying to realize certain thought patterns, what you should understand is what you should really understand is you're not as invulnerable to thoughts as you might think. All right, motorcycle dudes helping motorcycle dudes. I'm glad he ran away though. So, all right. So, realizing that that emotions themselves are your own clay, basically. You can mold and construct an emotion that is completely made up from fictional thoughts, basically, from emotional patterns that you realize from thoughts that you might not think about often, but they can be brought about by literally watching a movie or seeing something that you haven't seen before, like a CGI effect or anything like that. So realizing that with emotions, and also too, I mean, there are real things out there. So also be careful whenever you're thinking about certain things, or whenever you're going into something and you think that it's not real. Like to say that I'd say that certain things didn't exist, or certain things don't exist. What you have to understand is it really could have. Like anything you think about probably could have existed at some point. Like to say those huge monsters from Godzilla, Shin Godzilla, or things like that. They could have existed.
You have entered Fort Zancudo airspace. Divert immediately.
Probably in different planets in the universe. Son of a bitch. But moreover, realizing that your fight or flight instinct is probably what's causing your emotional construct emotional realization comes to thwart that and let you know that that when you're thinking about too many thoughts at once, they come up and they make a pattern, and that a pattern makes an emotion. So with any emotional realization,
Come on, lady.
know
Don't fight.
that when you're trying to get through a certain pattern, when you're trying to get through a certain pattern of thoughts, realize that it's affected by everything you've ever seen. Sometimes it's affected by everything you've ever seen. Sometimes it's affected by focusing on one thought, on one pattern, or on one news story, on one thing that you've ever seen, on one memory that you remember, and you blowing it out of proportion, or trying to put it under the rug, or trying to say that that it didn't matter to you at the time, or trying to emotional like I'd say emotional I don't want to call it covering up, but it's more like when you ignore a different thought, it's more like emotional battery. It's like you're beating up your emotions to try to tell it that it doesn't exist. Try to tell yourself that it doesn't mean anything to you. But also realizing that, and I'm gonna realizing that when your emotions try to manifest themselves, they manifest themselves as thoughts. Got it. All right. They try to manifest themselves as thoughts. Okay. So your reaction to anything that's ever happened before in your life can be an emotional construct that you have to realize that thought pattern. So realizing that like, okay, I met a girl that would talk to me, and then she'd like and this was in a mental hospital. So I talked to a girl that like she would first act like she wanted to hit on me, like flirt with me, but then as soon as she met any sort of I'd say any sort of emotional obstacle, like someone wasn't feeling her, somebody wasn't understanding where she was coming from, or she would try to flirt with people, and then every single time that she would meet that construct, that would anytime that she would try to meet that, like try to go up against an obstacle, she would meet it with malaise or emotional degradation to herself or to the situation. And that means, in layman's terms, trying to act like the situation didn't exist anymore. Trying to act like she never even made the action, and trying to act like, whatever then, it doesn't even matter. Like she tries to, or like a person tries to make a situation out of nothing, and then when that something isn't that something for someone else, they act like they never made that advance. It happens in everyday life, and it happens with people who are in a single life trying to get through to people, or trying to talk to different girls, or trying to say, like it's like saying oh, that girl's a slut because she didn't want to talk to me that one time, and that's the same thing, I guess. It's got the same emotional construct behind it, so that's the same emotional burden behind it as well, because it means that that when you were trying to make yourself better, or trying to make yourself something, you decided that you were the best at something, and when someone else tries to tell you that no, you're not that good at something, you're not the best at something, you're not the best at anything, you try to say that, oh well, you don't even matter, or it doesn't even matter, or something like that. And when you're realizing that when you're realizing that those things do matter, and and you should try to pick apart those thoughts and realize that they come from a certain I'd say they come from a certain thought pattern that makes you realize that you've been hurt once before, and once you've been hurt once before, you feel like you have to go back to that in order to be able to make the situation not affect you. So also realize that when you're around certain different people, those people have no idea what you're supposed to be. They have no idea what you're being. They have no idea what you're going to do in your life. So also realize that certain people in their lives, when they come to an emotional impasse, and like it's like they completely run on emotion, and they don't understand the patterns or the thought patterns that actually got them there. So what they're doing is they're trying to run their their brain completely on emotion, and it's really uncontrollable, and eventually it could turn into like an Akira situation, but that's not a fantasy. That's a warning. So realizations that emotions can be like projected onto people, and emotions being projected onto people can moreover be like because of a certain reaction to a certain thing they said, people can project their own emotions as far as the situation goes onto other people, and when you're constantly around a certain person, realizations about that certain person, and and if you haven't met a lot of people in a certain given week, I guess what you can do sometimes is make an emotional and I say an emotional construct, but it has to do more over like an emotional suit. You put the suit on anyone else that you think doesn't matter to you, or think matters to you too much, and you emotionally react to them the same way you would like your mom, your dad, or your or even a significant other, or even a friend that maybe saved your life one day, or helped you with something one day, and you really like them for that. But every single time you go back to that emotion, you have to understand that every single time you go back to that emotion, you have to understand that it's only for your brain to actually think in more simpler terms. That's basically what an emotional construct is. Emotional realization is the thwarting of that. So you have to work in unison with both of those things. Emotional constructs can get you places. They can make you realize different things, and also those thought patterns can get you different places as well. And realizing that you have to use both the emotional construct and emotional realization to be able to thwart the same thinking over and over again, because people can say the same, it's like they can say the same action over and over again, but it's also the same thought process over and over again, expecting different reactions from other people. So let's say that was what crazy means. So that's what it is. You can actually think about yourself in a different light when you start to emotionally realize stuff about yourself. You can start to realize that when you thought about those things, or when you thought about a certain person, that certain person was only the idea of what you thought about them. It was not the actual person. It was not what they meant to you. It was not how they meant anything to you. It was merely just you getting rid of something. All right, now I got a motorcycle. You're getting rid of certain I'd like to say certain emotional baggage, because because your mind can. It's just like, okay, it's like that song, work it harder, make it faster, do it better, make it stronger. That's how your brain basically deals with thoughts. Like because you use different emotional constructs to be able to realize different things. It's really hard to do as far as trying to make something of yourself, trying to do something with yourself, trying to help yourself, and also realizing that when you go to a certain person or when you go to a certain place in your mind, you're experiencing emotions over and over again. And when you feel something unfamiliar to yourself, like there was this, I read this book, and it was about emotional realization, but it made you come up with fictional characters in your own mind, and I'm not exactly down with that. I make fictional characters to entertain myself. You know, I don't make fictional characters to try to be the guardians of my thoughts, because if you give something in yourself an emotional construct, you can start to personify that emotion, or you can start to personify that thought process. And if you give it a name or you give it anything, then what you're doing is basically making yourself emotionally inept. You're trying to control your emotions by giving them a name. And eventually it can make you schizoaffective. I know that's not the way that I'm schizoaffective. People have kind of diagnosed me in that sense. But as the way that
This is a no-fly zone. Divert your course.
actually do things. As the way that I actually do things. God damn it, I'm right over the military base. Excuse my dad. As for the way that you actually do things, for the way that you actually make things happen, or the way you actually what's the word? Make thoughts appear in your own head, like make images appear in your own head, and you try to go through what you've seen just before. You use your whole brain to unlock new pathways, or to calm yourself down, or to make something that you've never seen before, or something, and also realize that you're using different constructs from your own brain that you actually have seen before. That's the reason why sometimes you'll make a character up and he'll look exactly like a different character, or realizing that that when you put something to paper, then when you make something towards yourself, or if you try to put an idea on paper, what you're doing is an emotional construct. You're not making an emotional realization. You're making an emotional construct, and through realization, you'll be able to thwart that and be able to I'd say individualize yourself away from it. But what you're gonna do as far as making certain different things or trying to make up certain ideas is realize that it's not therapy. Realize that making different stuff is not therapy for yourself. But I'd say that drawing is therapy for me. I'd say that it is because it makes me believe in a certain way that I can come up with pretty much anything, or I can draw pretty much any picture. That gives me self-confidence. So it's an emotional construct that gives me self-confidence, but in the same way, it's therapy every single time I do it, I guess. So when you're coming up with different ideas, realize that you're making an emotional construct. You're making something that you yourself can control. So that's a construct in itself. So when you're when you're making those emotional constructs, and when you're realizing different things about those constructs, you'll also realize that those ideas themselves, don't exist without you. So when you're, and that's probably the reasons why they have those idea copyright sort of thing, because those ideas don't exist without you. No one is going to see something in your mind just like you see it. That's moreover what stories are about. So also realizing that that I personally believe that the Bible itself probably happened way differently than anyone's actually saying. Not only because what's the word? It's depicted in so many different lights, but also because it was written so many different times, and it was told to people who were depicting it literally 500 years after it even happened. So details were changed, people were changed, names were changed, likenesses were changed, so many different things were actually changed. And what people have to understand is they tried. It's like what I think. Moreover, what Jesus was a construct for was a universal race, I guess, or universal, not universal, but at least earthling race. Humans were humans at some point or some given point were humans at some point were given, I guess, certain DNA traits and certain DNA constructs, I guess, and those things became, I guess, is that E3? Alright, we're gonna steal this car now, because they have the same car, so they can carpool. Alright. But also realizing that no, just because there was an albino girl born in Africa, it means that there's a melanin deficiency in her skin. And no, it's not about race. It's not like, it's just a realization that, oh my gosh, eventually we all kind of look the same sometimes if we all do the same shit. So, but that doesn't mean we're related. So it just means that, it means that, it doesn't mean we're connected in any way, because, I mean, that's just emotional connection. Like, we're connected through emotions. We all experience some of the same emotions, because also the same thing, we're all carbon-based life forms. I mean, carbon-based means that carbon is matter, and we eat matter. So we don't just eat energy and crave energy. So when we crave energy, we have to understand that we crave matter as well. You know, carbon. So, and also depending upon the taste of that carbon, it will give you a 4 to 0 star rating on Yelp. All right, so good jokes. All right. So understanding also that that emotional realization can lead to emotional realization can lead to, I'd say, what people would call, I guess, what people would call, baser human,
Look out! Are you fucking kidding me?
Alright, I'll get that red car because this car is fucked up.
What the hell? Come on, bro!
And also, in the same sense,
What is happening?
I was trying to put up the hood and
this is total bullshit.
the cab and soft top, but realizing that that when you go through certain emotions, your life can lead in different directions. Your life can lead in different directions because of the emotional constructs that you set forward for yourself. Emotional realization tries to thwart emotional constructs because it tries to make you feel differently. You yourself, obviously, through emotional realization, are trying to make yourself feel differently about something or about someone or about anything. So realizing that those things are true, you should try to make yourself feel better about what you're doing every single day. And we're gonna steal this car now. It's a station wagon, but we're gonna see if we can go off road. All right. But yes, emotional constructs are basically the pattern in which every day we do things. Emotional realization is the breakdown of those thought patterns behind the emotional construct. So also realizing that if you don't have that much experience in something, your emotional construct will be either way too short sometimes or way extremely too long. Because without experience, there is no construct that you can make that can get you through, I'd say, what is an Armageddon-like situation. Like a bunch of zombies around you, surrounding you, and completely around you. So like, I'd say like Glenn should have died when he got bit by that goddamn zombie, or when he was pretty much surrounded by zombies, and it was eating that body on top of him. You would think that it would eat that thing, that they would eat him as well. But unfortunately, they were probably full afterwards, and that Glenn was just lucky that day. Unfortunately, he got a bat to the face. Alright. Realizing that your emotional constructs and emotional realizations can't coincide. You're using emotional constructs that are fictional, that are just like I'd say, like if you train for a certain situation over your entire life, like in the military, if you train for a certain situation your entire life in the military, and then that situation doesn't come about ever, that can actually trigger PTSD if your emotional constructs are not realized. So if the emotional constructs themselves, if the thought process behind the emotional construct isn't realized, you can get PTSD literally from just writing. What's the word? You can get PTSD from just literally riling yourself up, and it sounds really stupid and really dumb, but when you start to get emotionally inept towards the things that are actually real, what you'll start to understand is you're disappointed because you don't get to use your real world skills on something that you've trained for your entire life. But unfortunately, that's not the reason why you should be disappointed. Be disappointed because Be disappointed because you yourself weren't ready for that situation. They didn't believe you were ready for that situation, and that's why they never put you in that situation. Realize that you weren't ready for that situation emotionally, and that's probably the reasons why you might have PTSD. So I've seen different people around. I've seen different people from so long ago, and the reason why I don't like them sometimes is because they're not being honest with themselves emotionally. They're not being honest with themselves physically, and they're not being honest with themselves completely. So sometimes they lie to themselves, or people lie to themselves all the time about what they believe in life and how they're supposed to believe it. But know that just because you're in the military, people are going to treat you differently. Like, and they shouldn't, because the realization that, you know what, eventually one day you're going to retire, and then the next kid is going to come up and tell you about yourself, but also realize that eventually that person's going to retire, and they're going to go through the same. They're probably going to go through the same emotional realization, or without emotional realization, the emotional construct which they go over every single day of their lives. So realize that every single thing that you go through as far as a person, it can be compounded upon if you don't realize the thought process behind it. If you don't realize the thoughts behind it. If you don't realize the people who are trying to make you realize different things, or trying to help you. And in some ways, it can hurt you too, because sometimes people are selfish, I guess, and I've been selfish before. I've been unbelievably selfish before, and tried to build an emotional construct completely off of fiction, or completely off of what I believe was real. That emotional construct itself comes out as certain jokes that people do not understand, and I do that because I try to make fun of what people don't believe, and more so if they believe in an imaginary man with a sword or a shield, basically just floating about, giving them advice, then why can't they believe in stuff like sci-fi? Like it's stupid to me. Like, you believe in a man that literally just floats around giving you advice, and it floats around giving you advice and tells you what to do every day, or tells you how to do it, and it gives you glory, basically. But somehow you don't believe in magic, and that's pretty much magic, you know? That's pretty much magic. Like, if anything were to actually like come of it, then yeah, if God exists, then so does everything else. Like, literally, if God exists, then literally everything else exists. Star Trek is real. He really fought that rubber lizard man to the death with a rock, and pretty much that. Or it might have happened in a certain way, you know, like probably a lot more action and awesomeness and coolness and stuff like that. But yeah, then I believe in pretty much anything, you know. So if they get that, then I get the Church of Sci-Fi and horror. I get the Church of Sci-Fi and horror. Yeah. So but also I hate that song. But also realizing that that there are people out there that really do care. That there are genuine people out there that really do care about you and really do want to see you do well. So realizing that, even if they don't know you, like, there are people out there that wouldn't wish you harm, you know? And that always calms me. That emotional construct always calms me, and always helps me believe that there are people out there that actually want to see me do well and want to see me do good. So, and that helps me every single day, even if I don't know them, even if I've never met them, even if I've never seen them. So, the realization that that there are people out there that help me, that want to help, that just want to see people do well and do good things, and instead of like acting like a fucking gangster all the goddamn time. Because technically to me, gangster doesn't fucking exist. So it really doesn't. It really never did to me. There's no such thing as gangster. It's just a dude wearing a suit trying to shoot people. It's dumb, it's stupid, it's idiotic, and it never made any sense. It's not a goddamn style. It's not a lifestyle. Because they either die or go to jail. And it's not a lifestyle that I want to live. It's not a lifestyle that I don't think that anyone should live. Because gangster in the old days meant something completely different. And just because it was, and not just because it was from a different race or from a different person or from a different anything. It was because it meant something completely different. It meant you're going to take care of your family, you're going to take care of your people, and you're going to do it by any means necessary. That's what it meant. That's what it always meant. And to me, if this whole I'm gonna go shoot some motherfuckers in the face, no. That's the reason why I don't fucking believe in that shit. And the mumbling bullshit because they took too much goddamn syrup and shit, they're making fun of themselves. They need to go get some goddamn speech therapy and actually do some shit. Because like pay for a class with how much money you fucking have. Go back to college, do something. Study English. Study any kind of language. Study another language if you want to. So you can rap in another language and not mumble. You know? It's dumb. It's stupid to think that what our society has become is like kids making fun of a dude, making a meme about him rapping when they should be concerned about his well-being because he probably smoked himself, or not smoked himself. Well, yeah, probably smoked a bunch of crack and then smoked himself into a stupor. And then some dude thought he was like the tightest rapper ever back in the day. And then they don't. Like they just don't. Because that's what the memes are. They're making fun of people. And people can say that oh, I got a bunch of different stuff, and what does that make you? What does that make you? What does that ever make you? Like emotional constructs, emotional realization. What does that make you emotionally? If you're like a gangster, or if you're taking care of your family by any means necessary, and when you get rid of a job, or you get rid of something because your friend wants to go rob a liquor store or something like that, and you get picked off because you didn't want to listen to your parents and say maybe you shouldn't have got that extra large screen TV or that 60-inch screen TV because, you know, I mean, you don't have to see everything on the goddamn screen, you know. You don't have to see absolutely everything on the fucking screen. It doesn't have to be like real life, because know that there are things that you can make up on your own, and the more emotionally inept you become, the more realizations you don't get, the more people you don't get to see, the more people that you push away, and realize that those emotional constructs and that emotional realization, you won't get that because you'll be too busy trying to make money. You'll be too busy trying to make the dollar, when realizations is you're just chasing it because you're spending it as soon as you make it. Because that's what gangsters do. They spend their money as soon as they make it on stuff they don't need, on stuff they don't want, on stuff that just thinks that they can make somebody smile with, or sell it to them. You know, try to sell something to somebody. Become a PR company if you're so good at freaking making people feel good or something like that. Seriously, become a PR company. Be a real gangster. Like, be a real dude. Like, and don't try to be a gangster. Don't try to be anything that's about that. But it's the same way for people who live in metal and wanna believe that that everything is just so terrible and oh, start a revolution and shit like that. But no, man, it's dumb. Because I mean, you can protest, but peacefully, obviously. But remember that. Realize that that the more you try to push for something more extreme, the more extreme people will see you as. The realization that that when your emotional constructs start to take over and take over your personality, the more you give into that. The more you give into everything. The more you give into whatever your life is, and start to not be the controller of it, because you're the controller of your life, not the other way around. Your life shouldn't be controlling you, you know? Because, or whatever you do, or however you do it, you know? People can say that oh, I'm talking about like black people versus white people or something like that, but no, I'm not. Because there's plenty of people that started revolutions back in the day that had no idea what the fuck they were talking about, or no idea what the hell they were doing, and it actually hurt people. And that's what actually gets under my skin. Is you'd much rather see somebody get hurt in the name of you getting something done. And I'm not saying that if you know there's police violence, if you know there's police out there that will hurt you, or if you know that police out there that will pepper you if you try to do a sit-in, then why do a sit-in? Why do a sit-in where there's police that'll hurt you? Go to a peaceful place. Go somewhere that's not so freaking hectic. But oh, you want to live in the city and you want to live somewhere where that's amazing. But I live in the suburbs. I live outside of the city. I mean, granted, I'm just saying that the more you try to push yourself away, the more you try to push yourself and give yourself an emotional barrier between the rest of the world and you, the more you'll realize that those emotions will control you. The more you'll realize that barrier will control your every move. And that's the reason why I don't like to say barrier, because I don't like to say barrier too often, but realize that, oh shit, I'm on the freaking, that was pretty awesome. Did amazing things just now. I parked perfectly. Alright. Realize that those emotions will control you. Realize that every single part of those things, and if you want to be a good emotional I'd say emotional an emotional counselor for yourself. Realize that you're either going to be your own worst enemy, or you're going to be your own best friend. There is an in between, but it's hard to actually get there. It's way hard to get there, and realize that you'll be inept to be able to some emotions because of it. You're going to be your own worst enemy, or you're going to be your own best friend.
Get out the fucking way.
The most that you'll ever figure out as far as emotional realization is that you're not alone. If that's all you want to know. You're not alone in your struggles, and that's the most I'm going to give, because doing it is completely individualistic to every different person. It's completely individualistic, and making those people your people, or your friends, your relatives, your members of your club, or your stupid gang, or whatever. Realize that the more you push yourself to see something, the more you try to push yourself every single day to be able to realize something emotionally, the more you'll realize that those thoughts aren't yours. Like, there's something you made up in your own mind, and you can let those go. So also realizing that to me those things mean nothing. Like, I love my family, I really do, but when I'm by myself, they're not on my mind a lot, you know? I mean, I'm worried about them, and I wish them well. I really do. I always do. But but also they're not in my emotions, you know. They're not hidden somewhere in a genome. You know, I don't think about that bullshit because that just gives that gives you less control over your own emotions, and it gives you more control in realizing that nothing is real to you, or nothing is trying to be real to you. So damn it. Okay, I think this is where I leave you. I realized that I went off on a tangent, but emotional realization is real. Emotional realization, along with emotional constructs, can make for a healthy relationship between you and your brain, and your emotions and your psyche, or whatever people want to call it. Like I said, I'm not a professional. I'm just speaking off personal experience. So I believe in all of you, and I believe in myself, first and foremost. This has been Game Therapy with Joe Bomb Squad. Thank you very much. Beep.